This is Bloomberg Businessweek. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine, plus global business, finance, and tech news. The Bloomberg Businessweek podcast with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec from Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the weekend edition of Bloomberg Businessweek. We're going to just kind of cut to the chase here because this week has really been so much about what is one of the world's largest market cap companies. It's the chip maker at the heart of the artificial intelligence boom. We are talking about NVIDIA, which wrapped up earnings season for us and gave a revenue forecast that fell short of some of the most optimistic estimates, stoking concerns that its explosive growth is waning. More in the report as it was coming out in just a moment.
Also this hour, Dell and AI. We speak to the CTO and Chief AI Officer at the computer giant about what's coming up.
And later on, rather than large language models of AI, we talk simply about learning another language with the CEO of Babbel. All of that to come. We begin with the most anticipated earnings report from this past week. NVIDIA. The chip maker failed to live up to investor hopes with its latest results this past Wednesday, despite beating for the past quarter. But nonetheless, it delivered an underwhelming forecast and news of production snags with its hyped Blackwell chips.
The company's quarterly report met or beat analyst estimates on nearly every measure. But NVIDIA investors have grown accustomed to blowout quarters, and the latest numbers didn't qualify. After the company's earnings call, CEO Jensen Huang sat down exclusively with Bloomberg TV's Ed Ludlow to talk about the results and how AI is impacting how every layer of computing is done.
I think the market wanted more on Blackwell. They wanted more specifics, and I'm trying to go through all of the call and the transcript. It seems like, very clearly this was a production issue and not a fundamental design issue with Blackwell. But the deployment in the real world, what does that look like tangibly? And is there a sort of delay in the timeline of that deployment and thus revenue from that product?
Let's see. That's just the fact that I was so clear and it wasn't clear enough kind of tripped me up there right away. And so let's see. We made a mass change to improve the yield. Functionality of Blackwell is wonderful. We're sampling Blackwell all over the world today. We show people, giving tours to people of the Blackwell systems that we have up and running. You could find pictures of Blackwell systems all over the web. We have started volume production. Volume production will ship in Q4. Q4, we will have billions of dollars of Blackwell revenues, and we will ramp from there. The demand for Blackwell far exceeds its supply, of course, in the beginning, because the demand is so great. But we're going to have lots and lots of supply. And we will be able to ramp starting in Q4. We have billions of dollars of revenues, and we'll ramp from there into Q1, into Q2, and through next year. We're going to have a great next year as well.
Jensen, what is the demand for accelerated computing beyond the hyperscalers and Meta?
Hyperscalers represent about 45% of our total data center business. We're relatively diversified today. We have hyperscalers. We have internet service providers. We have sovereign AIs. We have industries, enterprises. So it's fairly diversified. Outside of hyperscalers is the other 55%. Now, the application use across all of that data center starts with accelerated computing. Accelerated computing does everything, of course, from the models, the things that we know about, which is generative AI, and that gets most of the attention. But at the core, we also do database processing, pre and post processing of data before you use it for generative AI. Transcoding, scientific simulations, computer graphics, of course, image processing, of course. And so there's tons of applications that people use our accelerated computing for, and one of them is generative AI. And so let's see, what else can I say? I think that covers it.
Let me jump in, Jensen, please, on sovereign AI. You and I have talked about that before, and it was so interesting to hear something behind it, that in this fiscal year, there will be low double digit, I think you said, billions of dollars in sovereign AI sales. But to the layperson, what does that mean? It means deals with specific governments. If so, where?
It's not necessarily. Sometimes it's deals with a particular regional service provider that's been funded by the government, and oftentimes that's the case. In the case of Japan, for example, the Japanese government came out and offered subsidies of a couple $1 billion, I think, for several different internet companies and telcos to be able to fund their AI infrastructure. India has a sovereign AI initiative going, and they're building their AI infrastructure. Canada, the UK, France, Italy, I'm missing somebody. Singapore, Malaysia, a large number of countries are subsidizing their regional data centers so that they could become able to build out their AI infrastructure. They recognize that their country's knowledge, their country's data, digital data, is also their natural resource. Not just the land they're sitting on, not just the air above them, but they realize now that their digital knowledge is part of their natural and national resource. And they ought to harvest that and process that and transform it into their national digital intelligence. And so this is what we call sovereign AI. You could imagine almost every single country in the world will eventually recognize this and build out their AI infrastructure.
Jensen, you use the word resource, and that makes me think about the energy requirements here. I think on the call you talked about how the next generation models will have many orders of magnitude greater compute needs. But how will the energy needs increase, and what is the advantage you feel NVIDIA has in that sense?
Well, the most important thing that we do is increase the performance and efficiency of our next generation. So Blackwell is many times more performant than Hopper at the same level of power used. And so that's energy efficiency. More performance with the same amount of power, or same performance at a lower power. And that's number one. And the second is using liquid cooling. We support air cooling, we support liquid cooling, but liquid cooling is a lot more energy efficient. And so the combination of all of that, you're going to get a pretty large step up. But the important thing to also realize is that AI doesn't really care where it goes to school. And so increasingly, we're going to see AI be trained somewhere else, have that model come back and be used near the population, or even running on your PC or your phone. And so we're going to train large models, but the goal is not to run the large models necessarily all the time. You can surely do that for some of the premium services and the very high value AIs. But it's very likely that these large models would then help to train and teach smaller models. And what we'll end up doing is have few large models that are able to train a whole bunch of small models, and they run everywhere.
Jensen, you explained clearly that demand to build generative AI product on models, or even at the GPU level, is greater than current supply. In Blackwell's case in particular, explain the supply dynamics to me for your products, and whether you see an improvement sequentially quarter on quarter, or at some point by the end of fiscal year into next year.
Well, the fact that we're growing would suggest that our supply is improving. And our supply chain is quite large, one of the largest supply chains in the world. We have incredible partners, and they're doing a great job supporting us in our growth. As you know, we're one of the fastest growing technology companies in history, and none of that would have been possible without very strong demand, but also very strong supply. We're expecting Q3 to have more supply than Q2. We're expecting Q4 to have more supply than Q3, and we're expecting Q1 to have more supply than Q4. And so I think our supply condition going into next year will be a large improvement over this last year. With respect to demand, Blackwell is just such a leap, and there are several things that are happening. Just the foundation model makers themselves, the size of the foundation models are growing. from hundreds of billions of parameters to trillions of parameters. They're also learning more languages. Instead of just learning human language, they're learning the language of images and sounds and videos, and they're even learning the language of 3D graphics. And whenever they are able to learn these languages, they can understand what they see, but they can also generate what they're asked to generate. And so they're learning the language of proteins and chemicals and physics. It could be fluids and it could be particle physics. And so they're learning all kinds of different languages, or learn the meaning of what we call modalities, but basically learn the languages. And so these models are growing in size. They're learning from more data, and there are more model makers than there was a year ago. And so the number of model makers have grown substantially because of all these different modalities. And so that's just one, just the frontier model, the foundation model makers themselves have really grown tremendously. And then the generative AI market has really diversified, beyond the internet service makers to startups, and now enterprises are jumping in, and different countries are jumping in. So the demand is really growing.
Jensen, I'm sorry to cut you off. I will lose your time soon. You've also diversified. And when I said to our audience you were coming on, I got so many questions. Probably the most common one is, what is NVIDIA? We talked about you as a systems vendor, but so many points on NVIDIA GPU Cloud. And I want to ask, finally, do you have plans to become literally a cloud compute provider?
No. Our GPU Cloud was designed to be the best version of NVIDIA Cloud that's built within each cloud. NVIDIA DGX Cloud is built inside GCP, inside Azure, inside AWS, inside OCI. And so we build our clouds within theirs so that we can implement our best version of our cloud, work with them to make that cloud, that infrastructure, that AI infrastructure, the NVIDIA infrastructure, as performant, as great TCO as possible. And so that strategy has worked incredibly well.
That's NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang speaking exclusively with Bloomberg Technology co-host Ed Ludlow. Hear the full conversation on the Bloomberg Talks podcast feed, available everywhere you download your podcasts.
Coming up, another tech company riding the AI wave, Dell. We check in with the CTO and Chief AI Officer at Dell Technologies. That on the other side.
You're listening to Bloomberg Businessweek. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business App. Or watch us live on YouTube.
So a few weeks ago, Dell announced they are getting leaner, cutting jobs as part of a reorganization of its sales team to focus on a new group centered on AI products and services. You may recall earlier this year that CEO Michael Dell talked about AI PCs being pretty standard in 2025.
We wanted an update about what Dell is doing. For that, Bloomberg News reporter Katie Greifeld and I turned to John Rose. He's CTO and Chief AI Officer at Dell Technologies. We spoke to him before the release of Dell's latest earnings report.
CTOs have been around forever, but Chief AI Officers, at least at Dell and really in federal government and a few other places, started about a year ago. It was a recognition that this is complex. It's bigger than an IT project. It has to have somebody carrying and feeding it, because it was a lot of governance and technology coming together. So, for us, it was a year ago that we put the position in place.
We've talked about the Chief AI Officer in the context of the federal government and the new regulations around federal agencies needing a Chief AI Officer. Do you think that every company needs a Chief AI Officer?
I don't. I think some companies need Chief AI Officers if you're doing an at-scale kind of AI transformation of a large organization. But if you're a smaller organization, you need someone who's driving it. But do you need to change your organizational structure? For a company like Dell, we have literally hundreds, if not thousands, of projects that are going to happen, and 30% of our work is probably going to shift below the machine line. That is a gigantic effort, and having someone in the position from an executive perspective is necessary. But smaller companies are going to depend on companies helping them navigate this rather than creating organizational structures.
Well, I'm curious in your role how you juggle timelines, because you think about the here and now. It feels like AI has to be in every single conversation. You have a ton of companies trying to gain a foothold or get up to speed or play catch up, but then you also have this fantastic long-term opportunity that we talk about all the time that no one really knows what that holds. So, I mean, in your day-to-day, what does it look like trying to juggle those two?
Yeah, as a CTO, my job is to make sure we never miss a technology inflection. So things like quantum live under me, and these are long-term plays. One of the interesting things about AI, though, is that the future is happening now. Yeah. There is no 5-year journey that you're going to get to eventually. The disruptions are happening almost weekly, and so this intersection between execution and vision is more pronounced than on any other technology I've ever seen. So, a good chief AI officer is not just an operational manager. They actually have to be extremely current with the technology and what is emerging so that they don't miss an inflection, which could happen in the span of like a matter of weeks.
I'm trying to figure out the way to ask this to contextualize it in the right way. But when we talk to people about AI, John, we oftentimes hear them say it's just like the internet in the 1990s. You're saying no.
No. On the scale of impact, it is. But I was involved in creating that era. I was the CTO of a bunch of networking companies in the 90s. And we had a decade and a half to kind of get there. And it happened slowly over time. It did have a profound impact. I think from a scale perspective, it's similar. But the speed in which this is happening, think about it. Let me give you an example. It'll be technical for a second. There's a term out there called retrieval augmented generation, RAG, which now is in the normal vernacular, which is amazing.
Katie, you never say that to me.
I say it all the time, man. Yeah. We were just talking about it in the commercial break. Come on.
So common term, very important technology, allows you to take your external data and use it with a large language model without the large language model absorbing it. That's pretty important, right? That term as a discussion in our industry is about a year old. It's foundational to almost every enterprise AI story that you can imagine. The technology didn't even exist 2 years ago. So the speed in which these things are happening, it's not like we've developed the internet and then we have 10 years to figure it out and mature it and then scale it. And 20 years later, everybody has to be there. This is, if you're not there now, or if you're not moving towards getting there, you're already late. And I haven't seen that happen in any other big technology inflection.
Is it more steam engine, like Jamie Dimon talks about, Industrial Revolution?
Yeah, it's after the steam engine existed and was commercially available, what you saw was this massive uptick. You had and it's actually a good analogy because the steam engine was a way to transfer energy. And you need to transfer energy to do all kinds of things, from producing goods and services to doing transportation, and so it became incredibly pervasive. AI is very similar. Anybody who tries to pigeonhole it, that it only does chatbots for searching stuff, or it only does enterprise applications X, Y, and Z is wrong, because it's a foundational technology. It's a different way to distill information into knowledge and wisdom, and you're going to apply it everywhere, much like we did when we moved to the internal combustion engine.
Well, let's talk about AI as it relates to Dell's business, because of course you've made an aggressive pivot when it comes to the AI server space. How different is the manufacturing and sales versus the traditional server manufacturing?
Yeah. First thing, maybe to dispel a myth, we didn't actually do an aggressive pivot, meaning about 4 or 5 years ago, we built our first AI servers, way before Gen AI. And the reason for it was that there were deep neural networks, there were early AI systems. Nobody understood them except maybe 100,000 people that were smart enough. And so we had been building these systems for quite a while and predicting that there would be a time where this would explode. This would be something that would be bigger. So when ChatGPT happened and suddenly Gen AI was available and we had this large language model explosion, we actually already had products that were ready to go into the market. And that's one of the advantages we had as this market formed. We were actually already there. And then what we had to do is adapt a little bit, but our supply chain was in place, our service organization was in place. We had to kind of optimize who we were selling to because it was new customers, but it wasn't really a gigantic surprise. The other thing that we have now concluded is that there isn't significant difference between the two markets in AI that we participate in. The first is the training market, these large-scale deals that we tend to be winning a lot of and are very interesting. And then the enterprise, which is actually not a training business, it's more of an inference business. It turns out that the products that we're building in the training side at scale transfer almost literally into the enterprise unmodified, which is a very good thing because we can address two markets with a portfolio.
Hey, John, one thing that we're really interested in is understanding who your AI server customers are today. We did see Michael Dell's tweet on shipping to Musk's XAI initiative. How would you define your AI server customers? Is it second-tier cloud that's accounting for the growth? Where are the traditional enterprise when it's coming to AI adoption?
Well, first, there's two very distinct markets. There is the traditional enterprise, which is still an early market. It's mostly experimentation. Those experiments are now graduating. I'll give you an example. Internally, we have a project that was first an experiment around our service organization of creating some tools that would allow people to make intelligent choices about troubleshooting a problem. We then very quickly moved from a prototype to thousands of people, and we're on a path to potentially 40,000 of our service technicians using this technology in a span of literally measured in 6 months or so. So the enterprise is on that journey. We haven't really hit scale in any meaningful way, but we have a lot of things in the pipeline as people are figuring it out. That market, I would say, is my view is a bigger market because there are millions of enterprises, and every process in every enterprise is a target for this technology, but it takes time to get to a point of stability, to transfer the knowledge, and to basically get moving. Great future. The today market is mostly characterized by the ones you mentioned. It's companies that are building their own foundation models. They are training large-scale models. That's not what enterprises do. Enterprises use those models to do inference tasks. The training business is growing dramatically because, quite frankly, that's the underlying engine of all AI.
But is it only a handful of companies that are doing it?
It's not a very big market in terms of compared to the tens of millions of enterprises out there of all size that are going to use it. The people that are going to produce these models is not anywhere near that number. There's more than a handful of them. There are certain tiers of them, as you mentioned. There are even certain enterprises, very large enterprises. X would be a good example.
You're talking about the OpenAIs of the world.
Yeah, they're also training their own models. And so, but the thing that makes them all the same is every one of those companies is building infrastructure to train large-scale foundation models. Enterprises aren't. Enterprises are using those models, putting them into production, maybe fine-tuning them. And so there's a very different market forming, but they're happening kind of a little out of phase, but in parallel.
When it comes to the competitive landscape, what does Dell offer that a Supermicro or even in NVIDIA doesn't?
Yeah, first of all, AI is not just a server transaction. There is storage, networking, but more importantly, it's especially when you go to the enterprise, it's end-to-end. When you're talking about deploying enterprise AI, you have to put it where your people and data are, which includes the AI PC, edges, distributed architectures. And that's why, when training may be able to consume servers just as a standard component, enterprise has to consume systems. And more the training infrastructures are consuming systems. And that's why our expertise in networking and storage and data center design, power cooling, all the things that we do, because we're very broad, come together and give us an advantage in both of those markets, more pronounced in the enterprise side.
We talk a lot about power consumption, and with power consumption comes great responsibility. But actually, that's not really the quote. Heat generation, that's what comes with power consumption. Yep. What does Dell offer to help lessen AI's power use?
Well, the first thing is, first fact is when you add a whole pile of compute, you have to use energy to do that. And yes, AI is a significant increase in the overall power consumption because we've increased the compute capacity of the world by potentially orders of magnitude. The levers we have to deal with that are quite numerous. The biggest one that's going on right now is we're moving to direct liquid cooling in a more pervasive way, and that is a much more efficient way of getting the energy out of these systems and basically dealing with cooling. But that requires a retrofit of infrastructure and investment, but it turns out it does work quite well. We've been doing direct liquid cooling for, I think, 20 years. Our Alienware products on the gaming side have been doing this for, you can't buy one now that doesn't have direct liquid cooling. So it's a space that's important. But beyond that, there are other decisions you make. One of the most interesting ones that we're exploring, and this is more for the enterprise side, is once you choose to put your AI into production, there are two places in an enterprise that you can run it. You could run it in a data center, which is what people are starting with, or there's this little thing called an AI PC emerging, which says, what if I take that model, I requantize it, I basically make it small enough to run locally, and I move it out to the computing device, onto the PC itself.
Doesn't that still use the energy, but it just uses it locally rather than...
The energy is still being used, but the energy was going to be used anyway. Those PCs, one, they're distributed, so they're not sitting at one choke point on the grid. I don't need to put megawatts to a PC. I have AC outlets everywhere. I have batteries on them. And in fact, the total number of MIPS in the world sitting on PCs is probably bigger than the total amount of MIPS in a data center.
MIPS?
Million instructions per second, the measure of compute performance. And so the reality is, look at a typical AI PC today, and it's a relatively small amount of NPU capacity, neural processing unit capacity. But if you multiply it by 1 billion PCs, it's a pretty big footprint to go after.
That was John Rose, Chief Technology Officer and also Chief AI Officer at Dell Technologies. Bloomberg's Katie Greifeld joining there as well.
When we come back, more of that conversation with Dell's John Rose, including what makes a PC an AI PC.
A few years ago, we started looking and saying, well, could we build an optimized processor that was really very power efficient to do AI tasks? That's called a neural processing unit. And so we just announced a whole bunch of Qualcomm-based AI PCs, and we have Intel-based AI PCs. And the thing that makes them an AI PC in most cases is it has all three of those processors.
And while AI learns to speak more like humans, quite a few humans are using AI to speak to other humans.
Nice.
In our U.S. product, where for English speakers learning Spanish, we have rolled that out already, and people are very engaged with it. It doesn't judge you. I mean, it gives you feedback, but you're not embarrassed in front of the AI. You know, it's very effective.
The CEO of the language learning app Babbel on the other side. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 2 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business App. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
A couple of companies are betting that we're going to need more powerful computers to run programs that harness AI. That kind of makes sense. Dell is one of those companies. As we mentioned earlier, CEO Michael Dell has talked about AI PCs being pretty standard in 2025. But I feel like, Tim, we're still trying to figure out what exactly does that mean?
Exactly. So what makes a PC an AI PC? It's a question that I posed to John Rose, Chief Technology and Chief AI Officer at Dell Technologies. Here's the rest of our conversation, along with Bloomberg's Katie Greifeld.
Today, the definition is that it has a neural processing unit. So, get technical for a second, all PCs have central processing units, x86 processors. That's what most of us run our stuff on. And then years ago, we put graphic processing units, GPUs, which now NVIDIA is quite popular with in the data center. Same architecture sits on almost every PC, just smaller scale. And then a few years ago, we started looking and saying, well, could we build an optimized processor that was really very power efficient to do AI tasks? That's called a neural processing unit. And so the latest, Intel processors, Qualcomm processors actually have all three on the system. And we just announced a whole bunch of Qualcomm-based AI PCs, and we have Intel-based AI PCs. And the thing that makes them an AI PC in most cases is it has all three of those processors. You put them all together and you end up with a actually pretty beefy system that still is low power, runs on a battery, can take with you. The trick is, which we haven't done as an industry yet, is when we put the AIs into production, moving more of those workloads out onto those PCs moves them out of the data center. You've shifted the work, you've shifted the power and cooling, you've distributed it into a place that's ready for it, and that buys us a significant amount of capacity for the things that truly belong in a data center. We're going to do both, but today most people only do one of them, and they're not taking advantage of the billion PCs out there that could in fact be doing this work instead of in the data center.
Well, I'm glad you brought us to AI PCs because that's where I wanted to go, because Dell has been out front talking about AI PCs, really helping to start the conversation there. I think there's some stat out there that says that 40% of new PCs shipped in 2025 will be AI PCs. Does that sound realistic to you? What are you modeling?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the roadmap from Intel, definitely Qualcomm and others, they're all moving in this direction. Most of the latest Intel chips are absolutely, the ones that are coming and the ones that are in the market are qualified as AI PCs. The new Qualcomm chipsets that are now in the market on our products and starting to roll out, definitely AI. So it's not a function of, wanting to do something special. It's actually becoming mainstream. There will be non-AI PC chipsets out there because not everybody needs this, but in the business context, if you're going to put a Copilot out on a PC, if you're going to run that troubleshooting tool for your support group, if I can do that on an AI PC, the net impact is that it will be able to do it more efficiently. The NPU just uses less power for the same task, and so you end up with a much more efficient, much more performant system. Microsoft has released a whole pile of Copilot stuff that runs locally on, it's called Copilot Plus, and it includes image replacement and prediction and summarization. And they realized a long time ago that, hey, pushing a bunch of this stuff to be processed locally has a net effect from a sustainability and environmental impact of getting things into a place that already has the power to eliminate the burden on some of the data center architectures.
Okay, so what is a real use case for an AI PC?
Yeah, well, I mean,
Have customers figured it out?
They're figuring it out. The biggest one that's very visible right now is if you run the Copilot Plus technologies from Microsoft, which it's their kind of end-to-end stack. When you move them out onto the PC, one, it always works with you. Two, it generally tends to be more private data because the data doesn't move out into a cloud. And number three, the biggest impact is it just runs more efficiently. The non-Microsoft examples are already emerging. You have people like Adobe and others that are starting to think about how can I run my web app so that the processing is done locally to do background insertion. We have stuff that we built internally for our own uses around this troubleshooting tool and technology to help get a large language model powered AI engine underneath all my support technicians. Guess what? Dell support technicians rarely spend time in our data center. They're out in your data center and they got to bring those tools with them, and they might not have network access there because of security reasons. If I can bring the AI with me, then I guarantee a high quality of service. There's a lot of those and on and on. Remember, AI is horizontal. Yeah. We haven't figured out all the use cases. Just ask yourself, where do you want to bring intelligence that augments a human being in real time efficiently? And that's where you need an AI PC.
On my shoulder.
Right. Just telling me what to do.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Can we talk about pricing here, though? When it comes to an AI PC, how do you price that relative to a normal PC?
Yeah, I'm not a pricing guy, so I have no idea what where the market will land. What we do believe is there's more value in an AI PC. If you have this ability to do these tasks in a more efficient way and a more performant way, and you can't do them on an alternative PC, clearly that has value. And we already have lots of pricing bands within our industry. There's a huge difference between an Alienware, gaming machine and a Chromebook. They are both technically PCs. One of them you can run high performance gaming on and the other one you can't. And so we'll see that kind of stratification occur, but these are not things that are exotic and out of the realm. In fact, our newest products, the Qualcomm ones we just released, if you look at them, they're pretty mainstream pricing. These are not the old days of you got to spend $5,000 for a laptop to do something special. It's kind of within the realm of normal pricing, if you will, but it is a value play in the sense that it does something that, quite frankly, is better than if it wasn't there.
Hey, John, very, very briefly, when you're thinking about money you're spending, where's the investment going? 30 seconds.
Investment in AI? Or significantly. Two things. One, obviously, from a product line perspective, we are investing heavily on building out the products and services and technologies to enable our customers to build out their AI environment. And that's AI enabling and evolving our entire portfolio.
That was John Rose, Chief Technology Officer and Chief AI Officer at Dell Technologies. A big thank you, too, to Katie Greifeld of Bloomberg TV and Bloomberg News for joining me for that conversation. Carol, are you ready for your PC to be an AI PC?
I'm still not sure. I feel like there's still so much I need to learn. I will say, I think a lot of stuff we're going to be doing is on our phones, but I don't know. Maybe we'll see. I don't know. I think about like schools too. Like when will they adopt AI PCs in schools?
Yeah, many kids across the country already back in school after summer break. Can you believe it?
That is crazy. Yeah. Like I don't know. I can feel it though. And like the city's winding down.
The city's winding down. We do it a little differently here in New York.
Yeah.
We
start later?
Start later,
After Labor Day?
After Labor Day. New Jersey, too.
Wait, California, did you grow up that way?
I don't even remember.
Okay.
We
were after Labor Day.
Were you? Well, yeah, New Jersey's the same way.
Yeah.
Exactly. Many of the kids, when they go back to school, or maybe they're back in school, they'll take language classes. Maybe they'll learn Spanish, Mandarin, French, or they'll do what I did.
What's that? Nothing?
Take Latin.
Ah.
Yeah. Not the most practical of languages when it comes to world travel.
Great if you want to go to medieval times or something.
That's pretty good.
Just saying.
Well, you don't have to be in school to learn a new language. There's no shortage of apps and services out there to help you do that. Duolingo, Rosetta Stone, Memrise, and more, such as Babbel. Back with us is Julie Hansen, U.S. CEO of Babbel. She joins us from New York. Julie, good to have you with us. I mentioned a few names there, some of them publicly traded, including Duolingo. How do you differentiate, given that when you Google language learning apps, there's like 5 up there that are just sponsored results. There's a lot of competition in your space. How do you do it?
It is a competitive space, but I think there really are 2 big players in the market, and Babbel is one of them. Our differentiation is all about our pedagogy, if I can use that term, or the kind of the way we approach the learning, the seriousness of it, and the effectiveness of it. We have studies that have shown that Babbel is more effective than others in actually learning a language. But a lot comes down to also your personal style, the way you learn. Everyone learns differently. So we try to make sure we reflect all the different ways of learning in the app: writing, reading, speaking, of course, the most important.
Hey, how do you measure success? Because I think about, we talked with you, wasn't it around like the new year? And we talked about how people in the new year sometimes are like, I want to learn to do this or that. I want to lose weight. I want to learn a language. So I am curious, how do you guys measure success that people actually have learned the language and can converse and are fluent even?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I can assure you, we spend so much time on that topic. There's really two main ways to think about it. One is against the CFR, the Common European Frame of Reference, which is kind of a formal way of evaluating language abilities. And that's very common in Europe. Everyone knows it. But even here in the US, that framework is understood and used in some circles. And so we measure people's advancement against it. But at the same time, the most important thing and what we're trying to do in Babbel, because we know we'll never make you fluent. No app will make you fluent. So we're trying to help you get comfortable having a conversation. So we actually ask our users to evaluate subjectively, personally, their view of their progress. And that's for us, their own personal learner success rating is our number one way of looking at it, because at the end of the day, if you're, a B1 on the CFR scale, but you can't speak, then are you really making the progress you want? Or if you're a sloppy A something, but you're getting out there and making conversation, like that's really more success in many ways.
Julie,
so those two ways.
You said that no app will make you fluent, but can developments with AI and perhaps maybe a conversation partner that is a bot eventually make you fluent? Like, do you think that no app will ever make you fluent, or are we on a sort of pace to get to that at some point in the near future?
Well, fluent is a very high bar. Fluent is, live there, speak it. Like for
Dream
me,
in that language, right?
Yeah.
That's what they always say.
Exactly. And when I got to that point in college, when I dreamt in French, like it was incredibly thrilling. It's long gone, by the way.
I know a place where you can work on it.
We completely agree with you that a chatbot can serve that purpose. In fact, in our US product, for English speakers learning Spanish, we have rolled that out already, and people are very engaged with it. It doesn't judge you. I mean, it gives you feedback, but you're not embarrassed in front of the AI. It's very effective. We didn't, by the way, just throw an LLM in the app and say, have at it. Like we had a kind of an expert train it for a considerable period of time, and that's what makes it successful. But absolutely, that is going to help more and more.
What's the demographics? Is it a lot of people, maybe younger, starting jobs, or what is it? Is there some kind of, I'm always curious about like the folks using your platform.
It is a mix, honestly. It's not school kids. We are not aimed at that market for various reasons. In many ways, our best users are older, over, call it 45, because they have time. They have time in their lives to pursue this. But it's really all ages. Remember that in the US, in grade school, only 20% of students ever take a language.
Our thanks to Julie Hansen, U.S. CEO of Babbel.
And that wraps up the first hour of the weekend edition of Bloomberg Businessweek from Bloomberg Radio. Ahead in our next hour, with the U.S. Open now underway in New York City, we talk about this year's record-breaking Fan Week with the heads of marketing and event services over at the USTA.
Plus, it's the new age of sports betting, and the stakes have never been higher. Our Bloomberg Businessweek senior editor breaks down the forthcoming cover story of the magazine.
And escaping the real world, courtesy of Bloomberg Pursuits, we'll explain. This is Bloomberg Businessweek. I'm Carol Massar.
And I'm Tim Stenovec. Stay with us. Today's top stories and global business headlines are coming up right now.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business App. Or watch us live on YouTube.
Plenty ahead in our second hour of the weekend edition of Bloomberg Businessweek, including how betting is devouring sports. It's the forthcoming cover story of Bloomberg Businessweek magazine. It is all about sports and gambling.
Plus, dozens of delightful diversions that will take you to another place this fall. From books to TV, theaters, and more. courtesy of our Bloomberg Pursuits team.
First up this hour, the U.S. Open is currently underway in New York City. With hundreds of thousands of fans descending upon Queens, New York, I think it's safe to say it's one of our favorite things to do of the year.
Yeah, no question. Not only do we get the chance to watch some of tennis's biggest and best.
What's the drink?
The rising stars, the honeydews.
Oh, the honeydews. It's all about the honeydews.
Because our trips to Flushing Meadows usually include a pulse check, also with those who understand the growth of the sport, how to provide food and drinks to so many hungry and thirsty tennis fans, and what it takes to put together the best overall fan experience, including an Avengers-inspired U.S. Open comic book.
Kirsten Corio is USTA Chief Commercial Officer. She joined us live from the U.S. Open to reflect on how it's already a record year for the event.
We had just unprecedented demand all year. When we first went on sale, the original American Express early access for the pre-sale, we sold as many tickets in the first hour as we did in 5 days last year.
Wow.
So it's just double-digit percentages up. The on-sale a week later, double-digit percentages up. The demand is nuts.
There was this big concern 2 years ago that with Serena Williams no longer playing, that you wouldn't see huge demand here in the U.S. That obviously wasn't the case. We talked to you about that last year. How do you explain the growth from last year to this year, though?
I think there are nearly 1 million people, 957,000 to be exact, who enjoyed the 2023 U.S. Open, who said, man, I'm definitely coming back in 2024, and I'm going to take some more friends with me, and I'm going to tell all my friends. That's the simplest answer I can give you. But, beyond just the success of this event, it feels like for the past few years, tennis has been having a moment. More people in the U.S. are playing tennis.
Zendaya
and
in
perhaps,
a movie about tennis.
Yeah, Challengers, the movie. Zendaya representing the sport beautifully. And I just have to, credit the growth of tennis participation as an element in the desire for people to come out and see the top pros in the world.
Kirsten, how many people are returnees? Like what percentage of folks are just coming to the Open year after year after year?
Oh, a lot. Yeah. More than 50% of our Arthur Ashe tickets are sold to full series ticket subscribers who do purchase all 25 sessions year in, year out, and those renew at 98, 99%.
Which is amazing. And what about the age demographics? Like, I think we've talked with you about this, and I feel like golf went through it. Maybe, I don't know if tennis ever went through a little bit of a lull or people were worried. I don't know that was the case. But I mean, is it continuing to attract a younger generation as well?
Well, I think the short answer is yes, but Fan Week, which is now part of the 3-week and 1-day U.S. Open. The main draw runs for 2 weeks. The qualifying tournament runs the week prior that we've called Fan Week, and we built in all kinds of tentpole events to attract a more diverse younger audience, younger families to that. We had a record 216,000 people come through that week, that Fan Week. And so that's really the way that we can attract a younger audience, a younger demographic. We gave away 10,000 free rackets thanks to Wilson during that week. And we have Heineken happy hours from 5 to 7. Every one of those days, a block party. So I think that's a factor, too, in trying to attract a younger audience to how cool it is to be out here.
It works, and it translates into people coming to the Open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much more capacity do you have? When we talk about the number that came on Monday, more than 74,000.
Yeah.
Can you actually fit more people here?
We can't fit more people in the stadium. The stadium's capacity, Arthur Ashe Stadium is a fixed capacity. Louis Armstrong is a fixed capacity. But we also now are selling evening grounds passes, which is something we haven't done for a while. So we can get more people. We didn't like the concept of not allowing people to come into the grounds if there's tennis being played outside of those two stadiums, and you can go freely and watch those if you stay all day with a grounds pass. But if you only want to come for the evening and watch those matches, we'll sell you a grounds evening.
When are those matches taking
pass.
Place in the first? Are they in the second week? Or do you have
in the early
grounds?
rounds? In the first and second round, every one of our courts is filled with competition, and some courts have matches that will run all the way up until midnight, depending on how long the matches are. If they're quick matches, perhaps not. But in our first 4 nights of the first 2 rounds, you're likely to catch some great tennis on the outer courts as well as inside the stadium.
Well, I have to say, when I walked in, I was just blown away by the crowd even looking bigger than last year. And I don't know if that's the case. But it really amazes me, and over the years of coming here, just how it continues to grow.
Yeah, and So we think we're going to get 1 million fans through the 3 weeks and 1 day on
Which
site
would be a
this
record,
year,
right?
which would be a record. Last year, 957,000. This year, we're on track to meet and exceed that record. The weather's been great.
Yeah.
And that definitely helps people come out. And the events that we added through Fan Week and into the finals weekend, we've added a finals weekend festival and watch party in Louis Armstrong Stadium, as well as a finals weekend Fan Fest after party Saturday night.
Does it ever end
after
for
the
you?
women's final? We'll sleep a little bit on September 9th.
Well, you start all over again then for next year.
Well, you know
I how
what?
this works.
I noticed. I think last year when you rolled up to be interviewed by us, you had like a big energy drink with you, and I don't see the energy drink right now. So I think that's a good sign as to where we are in the tournament. Like, you're feeling good.
We're feeling great.
Okay.
Yeah. Next week we might need a little bit more of the adrenaline and the energy drink, but we're feeling great. We're just energized and exhilarated to see it all come to life.
You mentioned the weather. Do you see a decline in the number of fans who come out when a day is so hot? I mean, so hot that some of the tennis players complain about it.
Yeah. I think that's a factor. I think there are certain people, especially those that have had the privilege of being out to sessions before, either this year or other years, who may make a judgment call of if they don't feel that they can handle being in 90-plus degree heat.
So how do you think about year after year, like how you continue some of the things that are working, how you think about new ways, right? Because you think about revenue streams and how do you continue to build out the business?
So on the business side,
and keeping a balance of keeping the sport pure, that people don't walk through and feel like it's too commercial.
That's why Fan Week, and I'm sorry, I'm going to keep harping on it. Like that, it's such an important investment for us, and it is free for all fans to attend every one of those days, 7 days to come in. Free to go into Arthur Ashe Stadium and watch the top pros practicing. You can sit in the front row. A few days ago, I walked in before the main draw and saw Coco playing a practice match against Sabalenka,
which is like amazing,
in Arthur Ashe Stadium, competitively, but it's a practice match. And I'm looking at the fans sitting around that court who got in for free, and I'm thinking they're seeing a reprise of the women's final last year for free. So that's really important.
Yeah.
Now, business is, of course, very important too, and we do know that 50%-ish of people who attend Fan Week do ultimately buy tickets for the main draw. So it is a pipeline to build future fans. Adding tentpole events during that Fan Week that are ticketed events is helping grow the business as well and provide more exposure for our players. And so when we think about ticket sales and hospitality and premium, which are primary revenue streams, that's sort of how we begin to introduce and test new ticketed products.
Right.
On the premium and experience side, we've been adding new products to meet some of that experiential demand. This year we have a finals weekend clinic. A very limited number of clients will have the privilege of doing that, playing on a court with Andre Agassi and Andy Roddick before the men's final, before the women's final, and sitting in the courtside premiere, first few rows ticketed product. And so hospitality and experiences are a big part of that too.
How limited? You said that's a limited experience.
I
Carol,
think
are you trying to?
No, I
24.
For a ticket
I
or
would not
something,
embarrass
or-
myself.
24 for each session. Yeah.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That's a pretty cool thing.
And the women sold out first, which we also love that.
Who are
too.
they working with on the women? Same thing?
Same.
folks?
But the draw being the women's final.
Love that.
How are things looking on the sponsorship side in terms of demand, what you're hearing from companies, the appetite for them to come back and extend their agreements and partnerships with you guys?
They've been great. We've got a small-ish roster of partners, 24 official sponsors, 7 of which have been with us for more than 30 years.
It's amazing.
So there's a really strong renewal history and track record here, and you see our partners on the grounds activating everywhere and entertaining their own clients, but also interacting with fans and enhancing the experience for fans. The MX Fan Experience was open during Fan Week as well. And we added 2 new partners this year. We added Destination D.C. for Washington D.C. tourism, and we added Moet as our official champagne partner, which has come in handy.
Are you able to reliably raise prices each year for those brand opportunities to keep the revenue growing at the USTA from that side?
As long as we can demonstrate more value to the partner, the market, the value of the partnership can increase. But it's all dependent on what value does the partner wish to extract from the U.S. Open, and how can we quantify and qualify, the value that we've been able to deliver to that partner over their term.
What's fun about the sports world for you? Because you spent, 14 years at the NBA. I know we always bring this up, but I think here you're doing, tennis. There's so much going on. We've had a week where the NFL said, okay, for private equity to buy into, firms. We have been doing a lot of stuff at Businessweek about the explosion of gambling, basically, right, when it comes to all things sports. But what's interesting for you to kind of watch this progression and where things are?
Sports is just fun. Sports and live entertainment, to me, it's great. You can't predict everything, and that's what makes it really serendipitous and fun, but also sometimes stressful. Sometimes the energy drink is required. But we also, we just announced with our partners, ESPN, that we've extended our relationship through 2037. It will be the longest deal in tennis. And they're a fantastic partner, and we couldn't be more thrilled about that. So that's the big fun news. That did require a little help from our partner Moet in celebrating that one, but that makes it really fun.
A couple of bottles, like a couple cords
maybe,
went off.
maybe.
When we speak to you next year, what's going to be the biggest change?
Wow, for the 2025 U.S. Open.
Yeah, we're already thinking about it.
Yeah, we're
we
about.
Know you are. You will be in a week.
We sure are. I mean,
a couple weeks.
It's interesting. Like, day one begins, and we already have a 2025 list beginning of, okay, we're going to do this differently for next year. But I'll say when we look at the Fan Week and the tentpole events, we love them. We want to make them bigger, better, more exciting performances, and they really are a testing ground for us. You can't predict the competition on the court in the main draw, but you can plan for and create new experiences for the fans that come out and new ways to deliver that to people digitally. And when we think about digital, you may not see it here on the grounds. If you wanted to take a walk over to the Advantage Arena, you could play Fortnite. You could play U.S. Open Fortnite.
Right. That was Kirsten Corio, USTA Chief Commercial Officer.
We continue our U.S. Open coverage with a deeper look at not only the tennis event itself, but the venue that hosts it all. I mean, it is about the experience. Chris Studley is Senior Director of Event Services at the USTA.
We've had a great year, of course. It kicked off with Fan Week just a little over a week ago. Welcomed more folks than ever before to our site during that period. People are finding out about it, right? We don't have tickets that week, and people are flooding out here to check out the action, get close to the players.
Is all food and beverage that's available this week and next week available during Fan Week?
It's a great question. So years prior, we've kind of opened up slowly, but we knew that we were promoting this and trying to get more fans interested in it. So we opened the entire food village. We opened a few restaurants as well that wouldn't have been open in the past, and people really responded well. I mean, the fans that came out, over 216,000 of them. So we set all kinds of records, and people realized, what a deal. I can come on the site for free. I can get up close with the stars of today. It's incredible.
Having said that, how do you think about the experiences that you want in terms of hospitality? Because we certainly see certain things that come back every year, but then there's some new stuff. So tell us about kind of the menu that you think about.
Absolutely. So we look at all the data, right? We have spreadsheets upon spreadsheets. I don't want to bore you with those details. It's more fun to talk about the drinks.
Actually, Bloomberg, we're data people.
Sure.
No, that's so cool. What are the
spreadsheets is our language.
So we can look back and look at sales over prior years. I mean, I'm talking dating back to over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And we can see the trends in everything, right? What's the hot item? What needs to stay, if you will? What are we looking at that may not move? What's not moving the needle? What are our fans asking for? Maybe they're not buying. So we go in every year with a fresh perspective of, hey, in this stand, there's 3 or 4 items. This one's on the bottom. Let's refresh that. Let's do something new with it and see if it responds. So it gives us that opportunity. And just like that, over the years, when we've evaluated like this, we've gotten feedback, hey, try this, try that. And it actually shapes the food village a little bit every year. We piloted last year and the year before, we were piloting a mobile ordering system. We realized that our fans weren't really interested in it.
Huh.
What they wanted to do was take that walk down the food village. You mentioned it yourself.
I've done it.
Around.
I kind of love doing it and like looking. But there are sometimes lines, and I'm like, I can't wait.
Don't tell them there are lines. The job is to make sure there are no lines.
How do you do that?
Well, we look at everything from the technology that we use to process the transactions down to how the honeydew is made in a tap system now. So, by the way, you get the perfect ratio of vodka to lemonade to raspberry liqueur.
What's the guac
the
machine?
Avocado.
The avocado.
Yeah, what the melon?
The
that's what they have at Chipotle to make the guacamole.
No,
that's
so we're
awesome.
like, is there something for the honeydews?
There's a
melon
tap
balls.
system.
There's
Yeah.
a tap
Well, the
system.
melon balls, so interesting story about those. We're projected to hopefully do 500,000 honeydeuces this year. I think 3 melon balls per honeydeuce. You're talking 1.5 million melon balls. And we have a team that puts them on skewers. So they come in bald already, but there is a team behind
They do
the scenes.
come bald.
They come bald.
Okay.
Oh.
They come bald.
I was just going to say, you're going to be like, Chris is handing
They
out
come bald,
assignments.
not skewered.
No, you're handing out the assignments. You're on the melon ball team. I'm really sorry, but you're going to be like making melon balls in the back of the.
They're the
1.5 million
unsung
of them.
heroes.
1.5 million of them.
For sure.
That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
How much revenue does the Honeydews bring in? Or what can you tell us? We saw some numbers, so I'm curious.
What did you guys see? Let's start that way.
Was it
how much is the Honeydews?
$9 million in sales?
That's probably fair.
And that, wait. So
last year we sold about 462,000.
All right, and how much are they each?
22 last year, 23 this year.
Okay, you sold how many last year?
About 462,000.
Okay. So that's about 10.6 million in revenue.
Okay. Yeah. Combine the men's, women's tournament winners get 7.2 million in winnings. So you're making more.
Well, we have to pay the whole pool of prize money. The whole pool of prize money is much more.
I'm just saying.
There's a lot of other players that aren't the winning.
What if the winning prize money was based on just Honeydews revenue?
So take a percentage.
Equal prize
the
money.
player says, "I'll have a percentage of the Honeydews."
The players are like, "Go buy your Honeydeuces."
Listen, it all helps the fan experience, right?
It does.
Everybody in our newsroom was coming up like, "You're going to the U.S. Open. I wish you were there." Our Scarlet Fu said to me, "Wait a minute. So where did the Honeydews recipe come from?"
Great question. I've been asked that a couple times recently. Because we keep talking about how many people are buying
brilliant.
it.
She always has good questions. She does.
Well, funny enough, this is the first year we actually did Honeydews merchandise. So you can get a Honeydews hat or a T-shirt with the recipe on the back. And they sold like wildfire,
Seriously?
according to our merchandise folks.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah, it was really popular.
So where did it come up from? How did it come about?
It came up from a Grey Goose mixologist and a few USDA folks in a kitchen here on site over 15 years ago. Just before I joined the organization.
That must have been a
I had
fun
nothing to do with it.
kitchen.
I can't take any credit for it.
But it must have been a fun kitchen.
Absolutely.
Because they were experimenting on
They
that.
sat there and tried every different cocktail, and what's the one that resonated the most, right? What was the flavor of summer, so to speak? So then they even came up with the 3 melon balls to represent the tennis balls in a can. So not everybody realized that, but yeah.
Was that lightning in a bottle? I mean, the way that I talk about the U.S. Open to people, they always say, "What is that drink? What is that drink? What is that drink?"
Yeah, everybody does.
Yeah, everybody knows about it.
It's grown over time, right? It's just taken on its own persona. Thanks social media for that, right? As that took off, the Honeydews takes off. It's cool to come take your picture with the Honeydews.
So when are you going to do a mocktail?
We'd have to talk to our partners at Grey Goose and kind of figure something out if we can do that. But we do offer some mocktails a little bit for that.
It's like everything without minus the vodka, minus the key sponsor.
So you can have lemonade.
I guess that would be a
Would you like a lemonade?
And some melon balls.
Yes, lemonade with melon balls. We do offer a few mocktails
Problem
on the site.
solved.
It is a category that's growing.
Oh, it's totally growing.
It's taken off,
We have so many guests come on, and it's non-alcoholic beers, wines, like you name it.
Well, we do serve the Heineken 0.0, which is quite delicious for a non-alcoholic beer. So they are a good partner of ours as well.
On the food side of it, the prep time that goes into actually making sure that there are minimal lines, even though there are still lines.
Sure.
How do you have the balance of making sure that that the chefs are prepping ahead of time, but also making stuff to order? You're not going to get something soggy.
Yeah, so their goal is to not make the finished product days in advance for any stretch.
Right.
They're professionals what they do. I mean, even the best restaurants in New York City do a lot of prep, and they know where they can kind of cook the item to until they have to serve, and then obviously finish it. So they're the pros at that. I don't claim to be. I'm not a chef at all. Nor do I work in a kitchen. But
you're an operations guy, though.
Operations guy through and through. So, they know what's best. I trust them. They know what they're doing. We work with Levy Restaurants, which is a division of Compass Group.
Yeah.
They're around the world. They know what they're doing. They're pros.
So
go.
So do you have kitchens all set up?
All over.
Like all over?
Oh, yeah.
And stuff's coming in from off-site?
Yeah, we have about 7 commissaries on site. I'm talking massive kitchens. Wow. We even have one underneath the grandstand. The public would have no idea where it is. Kitchens in the back of every restaurant. So freshest food possible. It's built to serve the areas that they're in. So
From an operations perspective, talk to us about how you're using technology to sort of offset where people maybe add more people where people are going, add more stuff there. What's the tech side of this?
So on the tech side, not necessarily tied to food and beverage so much, but more tied to seating. Our fans, especially the first week of tennis right now with so many grounds passes and matches going on everywhere, we actually have cameras aimed at every bleacher, so you can kind of get an idea of where you're going to go, green, yellow, red, for what has seating available to kind of point people in the right direction to catch some tennis.
Love that.
All right, what's the most exclusive dining experience here?
Exclusive dining. Aces and Champions are our 2 signature restaurants. On the club level of Ash, you either need a courtside ticket or a suite ticket to access them. Those are probably what people just die to get into. The reservations are off the charts.
And what's this chicken dish with caviar?
So Kokodok by restaurateur Simon Kim.
Kokodok.
So if you've heard of it, popular restaurant in the city right now, one of
Chris
the hottest
Rouser
places.
knows about
I'm
this,
sure he
of our
does.
Pursuits team.
So we have the stand on the club level of Arthur Ashe Stadium, and it is just unbelievable. I mean, you can get regular chicken nuggets with dipping sauces all the way up to truffle nuggets or the caviar-covered nuggets, and it's selling crazy.
I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked Kirsten just in the last 20 seconds we have with you. What's the big difference that you're already planning for next year? What's something new that's coming in 25? What are you thinking about?
We're always looking at new chefs, new restaurants, what people are craving. I'll get back to you after I look at all the data.
That was Chris Studley, Senior Director of Event Services at the USTA.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Coming up, speaking of sports, we go in-depth on the new age of sports betting and how the stakes have never been higher for gamblers, sports media companies, and athletes.
The cover story of Bloomberg Business Week. That's next. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 2 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business App. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
It's hard to watch sports these days without thinking about gambling. Put on your favorite game and you will instantly see an ad either for DraftKings or FanDuel or even ESPN Bet. Last year, Americans spent $120 billion on legal sports bets, a 28% increase from 2022. Some are even draining their stock portfolios and shoveling more money into sports betting.
Not so great,
Yeah.
I guess many people might say.
No, not good.
It's the new age of sports betting, and it's the cover of the forthcoming issue of Business Week magazine. A no-holds-barred look at how betting has devoured sports. You can read it now on the Bloomberg terminal and at bloomberg.com/businessweek. And overseeing it all is Bloomberg Businessweek senior editor Brett Began.
It came about because for anyone who watches sports like myself, you now can't really watch sports without being completely inundated with ads for, as you mentioned, DraftKings, FanDuel, ESPN Bet, Bet360. I mean, we can go on and on, but essentially every other commercial now is related to a sports betting app. And we thought, let's take a look at this.
You guys have the numbers, too, to back this up. It's not just that you're, noticing more ads for this. I was pretty shocked to see this, Carol. Last year, Americans spent almost $120 billion on legal sports bets. It's a 28% increase from just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's a big bump.
Huge bump. I mean, that's basically, we can trace this back to 2018. So 2018, the Supreme Court said that there can be sports betting outside of the state of Nevada. We now have 38 states that have legalized it, plus Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia. So chances are you might live in a state where this is allowed, except it is not allowed in California, actually, at this point. But yeah, so it's become much easier for people to do this, as opposed to having to go to a casino, fly on a plane, go to a casino and do it. Now you pick up your phone.
I feel like there's a lot of different ways we can go, but I am curious about what the impact is on the states and the revenue that comes into them. And I'm also curious about what impact we're seeing on society. Before we dig a little bit deeper into some of the stories you covered, like, are we finding out that, yay, it's all great, or it's a little bit of a mixed bag?
It kind of depends on, it sort of depends on who you ask. I mean, the states wanted to legalize this because of the tax revenue that it brings in. What we found is that, a fairly small percentage of it is going to where you might want it to go, which is to help people who have problematic gambling patterns, right? A very small percentage of it goes there. A lot of it goes into state general funds, things of that nature. And in some instances, it goes to some odd things like aquaculture, or helping in very specific programs like helping to fight cancer in Michigan, things like that.
Okay. But it provides some extra revenue.
It does. It is extra revenue that's coming in. This is why the states wanted to legalize it. It's not always going in exactly where you might think it's going.
What about what it's done to the financial health of the folks in the states where it's legal?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the states where it's legal, there was a recent report actually pointing out that this has led to delinquencies on credit, bad debt, all the things that you can imagine happening when you when you have access to spending all this money on your phone.
Yeah, not so good. All right, so go through like some of the different stories and how you guys wanted to approach it.
Yeah. So one thing we wanted to do is definitely get the players' perspective in
Yeah.
here. So we talked to some current NFL players and some former NFL players.
And they love it?
Well, it's interesting. I wasn't entirely sure what to expect, but in many ways they're split. They say on the one hand it's great for the league, and it is great for the league, right? The league has partnerships with these apps. There's revenue sharing with the players involved in that. It's good for them. It keeps you engaged in the game longer. You could have a total blowout in the fourth quarter, but if your particular bet is riding on something that hasn't quite happened yet or been determined, you're going to still have eyeballs on the game. Eyeballs on the game means ad revenue, and that's good for the league.
Yeah, and one of the stories I remember reading that's in this issue, if a fan makes a prop bet, they're 20 times more likely to watch a sporting event. It's not just a prop bet, any bet. That's wild.
I get it, though,
For
right?
engagement, it's huge.
It is.
Yeah, because you're screaming. How many times how many changeovers are there going to be?
How many times will we see Taylor Swift? No, just kidding.
That's a real prop bet.
I know.
It's the greatest engagement tool that there is.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about integrity here, because that's a big question that I know a lot of folks have, and that was a really interesting story by Devin Gordon in the issue. How are companies making sure that pro sports players are not involved in these prop bets?
Yeah, so one of the requirements is that they hire what's called a third-party monitor, and we have a story, as you mentioned by Devin Gordon, about a company called US Integrity. That's one of the biggest ones. Essentially, they partner with the leagues to essentially have eyes on everything. They're always watching at all times. And they're keeping an eye out for anything during a game that might seem suspicious. And I learned so much about what can seem suspicious where you wouldn't think just with the, the untrained eye. But you could have a point guard, crossing center court who's sort of dribbling a lot without moving toward the basket. And they can look at that and say, well, is this guy trying to limit the amount of points that his team is scoring in order to hit the under on an over-under? U.S. Integrity essentially sends out signals to the leagues like, hey, something might be amiss.
Doesn't it feel like AI is the perfect sort of tool to do something like this?
It does, and yet it does require like a tremendous amount of touch to it as well that maybe that hasn't come to AI at this point. Like in the Jonte Porter case, which we look at, yes, conceivably AI could have spotted the
because there was this
pattern.
weird correlation about, these bets that were taking place on a separate platform.
Well, if you were to go make a bet today, you probably would put your money on somebody like LeBron James, right? That's who people bet on.
Yeah, even
Luka
I've heard
Doncic.
of him, and I'm not big
right. You have heard of LeBron
kind of a sure
James,
thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure, right? But to be placing a bet on a role player is that will immediately sound get a red flag that goes up. So that's what happened in that case, and they looked at it once in January and said, this is strange that all of the unders hit on all of the potential bets you could make on him. Let's keep an eye on this. And then again in March, when he did the same thing, then they said, okay, something is quite fishy here. They notified the NBA. The NBA did an investigation. They ultimately suspended him for life.
But, in order to spot that there's something maybe awry, if you will, is, I'm assuming, a sharing of data from either the odds makers and so on and so forth, who I'm sure don't want to share their information, right? So in order for this system to stay pure and have integrity, right, like people have to be able to make sure that they're seeing everything that's going on.
Right, and the odds makers are in this position where they basically have to turn over all of their information to a company like
Not a problem, right?
Integrity. Yeah, and we quote one who's like, oh yeah, so who do I have to turn this over to? Oh, there's only one company that I have to. Great, okay, so it is a bit of a not, I wouldn't call it a monopoly, but yes, they're not like thrilled about it, but they also realize that they kind of have to do it, and ultimately it does help them. They want a window into this as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I do wonder, is someone, or is the takeaway that because it's just increasingly there's more and more money? I mean, throw in college athletes who can now use name, image, likeness, which I think is a good thing in different ways. But I just feel like the money just keeps growing in collegiate sports, professional sports. Like at some point, not that money ever corrupts, but
Never.
At some point, are we going to potentially see something really bad?
Well, I mean, I'd say probably yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we're already starting to see harassment of athletes, right? Pretty directly for, let's say, costing you on an over/under bet.
Yeah.
But I think you raise college, which is a whole different universe and a whole nother ball of problems for everyone, basically, because the prop bets, which are very, very difficult to police, are even harder to police in college. If you think about it, if you're an athlete in college, you're living with, eating with, going to class with other people, and they could notice, hey, I noticed you have an ankle brace on today. Does that mean you're not playing tonight? Well, if an athlete were to say, yeah, I'm probably not going to, well, that person might say, well, I'm going to bet the under on your points tonight. It's so easy for information to seep out, and they're frankly terrified of it and of this happening.
Well, you raise a question that, at least I'm asking this question, why is it allowed in college athletics?
Well, that's a really good question because there's a lot of money to be made, basically. I mean, there are different states that have different rules around some of this stuff. Like there are certain states where you can't bet on an in-state team.
There's a lot of money to be made unless you're a player.
There is a lot of money to be made unless you're a player. Although, interestingly, when we were talking to the NFL players, they're getting revenue sharing from the deals at the higher end.
Yeah.
But some of them have actually said, hey, if somebody's betting $10 on me to do something, shouldn't I get $1 of that? Shouldn't I be getting a percentage of that? And I wonder if that's not going to come up in a future CBA.
It's unbelievable. Just a lot of money. Where do you want to go next?
Wherever you would like to go.
I want to talk a little bit about the platforms that are dominant right now. DraftKings and FanDuel over the last few years.
Don't forget ESPN.
Well, they're trying.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And that's what's so interesting because that's a Disney-owned company. And, it's the most magical place on earth.
Right.
And I know it was such a big deal, in the last 18 months or so when Disney-owned ESPN got into this because, it's not necessarily part of Disney's identity. We can talk about that part. But FanDuel and DraftKings were supposed to merge years ago and become the same company. That didn't end up happening. What does the landscape look like for these platforms?
Yeah, so we call it a duopoly in print. You've got FanDuel and DraftKings that run about 75% of this market. Really, they got first mover advantage. I mean, they were huge into fantasy sports, and so they basically had their name made by doing fantasy sports. And then when sports betting became legalized, they started doing sports betting. So they're really like front and center. They're what most people use. It's funny. One of the reasons that most people wind up using them is because they see other people posting wins online. They say, oh, well, where did this guy win? Oh, FanDuel, DraftKings. Okay, well, that's the one that I should be on. They also just tend to offer like the most number of bets. If you're looking for over-unders, like for instance in the Stanley Cup last year, on one particular bet or night, they I think had 8, and some of the other sites had 3. So if you want to make 8 over/under bets versus 3, they're really going to be the place to do it. They also offer a lot of customization, so they offer customized parlays at a rate that other sites don't. And essentially they're like in many ways the Kleenex of of this industry. They're just sort of the name brand that everybody knows.
Does that mean Disney isn't committed to getting more of this business?
No, they are. I mean, and Disney would argue, like, look, our ESPN partnership with Penn Entertainment is only a year old. Like, let us cook here. Give us a chance. They're at about 2.8% right now. According to them, they're where they expected to be at this point, but it is very hard to gain market share on these larger companies.
That was Bloomberg Businessweek senior editor Brett Began. The September issue now available on the Bloomberg Terminal and at Bloomberg.com/businessweek.
Still ahead on Bloomberg Businessweek as the sun sets on the month of August. How about a guide to the best things to read, movies and streaming and art to see, and theater to take in all this fall?
I am in. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business App. Or watch us live on YouTube.
Well, it pains me to say it, although I'm headed on vacation, so it's not all that
Doesn't
bad.
sound painful to you.
I will miss you. But I've noticed the days are getting shorter, and yes, this weekend we will enter the month of September, which can only mean one thing. The summer is over.
All right, she is just trolling Chris Rouser.
I'm waiting for the steam to come out of his ears.
Troll me on this.
Yeah, he and his Bloomberg Pursuits team already looking ahead to the most exciting art museum exhibits, TV and streaming's best new shows, Broadway, West End, having the popcorn ready for the new movies to check out. All coming this fall.
Right? There's a list of now things to do. All right, let's get into it with the editor of Bloomberg Pursuits, Chris Rouser, along with Bloomberg Pursuits arts columnist, James Tarmy. Do we have your title right?
You know what? You can call me whatever you'd like.
Yeah, that's right. He's our arts
Is that
columnist,
acceptable,
arts
Chris?
Guru, yes.
All right, so I don't even know who to start with. So I'm going to toss it off to Chris. Chris, tell us about this Escaping the Real World. Why did you call it Escape the Real World?
Well,
is it that bad?
Have you been? Where have you been?
Tell me, Carol.
Sorry, I've been medicated.
So
save some for the rest of us.
Every year, actually, so in the fall and spring, we always do culture previews, and James heads them up. And but we look at everything sort of pretty far out in advance. So even in the summer, as you guys know, I never want to hurry summer up to the finish. But last month, James and I were looking at all the culture stuff that was coming, and we realized that the most fun stuff, the stuff that seemed really exciting, that we were most excited about, was real escapism. So like thriller novels, movies about space, just like epic historical stuff and silly stuff. So we were like, you know what, this is a good fall where the culture is reflecting maybe a sentiment that we need to like take a little break from what's going on in the real world, and just escape into beautiful culture. So that was the theme of this section, and there's a lot of good stuff in it.
James, is this all about getting away from the election?
I didn't say it per se, but it is interesting that something was in the water where everyone decided that what the world needed now across culture was something that didn't deal with your day-to-day life. And so you have some extraordinary stuff here and things that really are going to take you out of the maybe hustle and bustle of more pedestrian concerns. And so you've got museum shows, you've got books, you've got all of these different things that really are a departure from politics or social concerns or cultural controversy.
All right, so take us to one. Give us start with where do you want to start?
I would like to start with TV because there's a ton of stuff that looks really, really fun.
Are you allowed to call it TV when there's so much streaming?
Honestly, probably not.
I'm just saying.
Okay, streaming then. Well, we're told that the golden age of TV is over, but it doesn't feel that way based on fall's lineups. You've got a lot of comedies. You have a Disney show that is in possibly a musical. It's called Agatha All Along. It stars Kathryn Hahn. It's a sort of spin-off of WandaVision.
WandaVision was awesome.
Yes, it was awesome.
And
everything about it was.
And I'm not even like a superheroes person. Yeah. But WandaVision was
incredible.
Amazing.
It was superb.
And Kathryn Hahn, I mean.
So it's from people who actually did WandaVision. So it's got the same some of the same creative team, but it's also got Aubrey Plaza and Patti LuPone. So you've got something.
Hence the musical.
Hence the musical. I think it's going to be something that a lot of people are very excited about. I am one of those people.
And they teased it on WandaVision. They sort of did a preview trailer for it in the show, and it looked goofy and fun, and just the tone looked incredible.
Exactly. There's another show that stars Kristen Bell. It's called Nobody Wants This, and it's a sort of like rom-com with a rabbi played by Adam Brody, who is the Seth Cohen character in the OC, if people can remember that far back. So
there's nods.
Wow.
It wasn't that long ago.
It was I think 20 years ago.
Okay, it doesn't feel that long ago.
But like Kristen Bell and Adam Brody shoot this directly into my veins. This is exactly what I want.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff on TV to like a lot. Chris, do you want to do theater?
Yeah, sure. So there's also a ton of exciting theater this fall. The spring had like an avalanche of new shows. A lot of them have closed, and so there's room for more. I'm most excited about 2 shows. One is the transfer of Sunset Boulevard from London to New York. It stars Nicole Scherzinger, who you may know from the Pussycat Dolls.
So she's going to be in the one here in New York,
She is the one here, yeah.
Wow.
She's kind of the whole point of the show, although it is a very cool production by director Jamie Lloyd. It's all black and white, very spare. There's video elements. It's unhinged. It's like you...
Have you seen it?
Yeah, I saw it in London.
And it was great?
It was great. Well, the funny thing is that in London, people don't stand up. Like, they don't give standing ovations a lot. And there's this moment where she sings As If We Never Said Goodbye, which is the big number.
Yeah.
And she holds this note for a deranged amount of time. And I was in the audience with my American friend, and we went to leap to our feet, and people were just sitting quietly clapping. And I was like, people in New York City are going to be tearing their hair out and crying. Anyway, it's going to be great. And then there's a new show called The Big Gay Jamboree.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you went there.
Which stars Marla Mendel, who was Celine Dion in Titanic, which is the downtown hit show here in New York, the spoof Titanic musical featuring the songs of Celine Dion.
I was going to say, I think you said Titanic wrong.
No. Tim, have you not seen Titanic?
I have not seen Titanic.
Tim, you got to see it.
Is it awesome?
It is so good.
I haven't seen it, but I have to tell you, prepping for this segment, I stayed up 20 minutes later because I went to the site and I clipped on all the videos and was watching all the songs.
You guys.
It's a phenomenon.
It is incredible. And so Big Gay Jamboree is a show that she co-created with Jonathan Ramage, who's a writer, and the director is Conor Gallagher. And it's about a woman who has a big night out. She's on a bender. She wakes up and she's in an old-timey musical, and she has to use her theater BFA to figure out how to sing her way out of it.
What a great
and
concept.
It's Margot Robbie is one of the producers. It's in a theater downtown. It's going to be huge.
I was also kind of floored that there's a lot of celebrities, right? There's Mia Farrow, there's Patti LuPone back, Robert Downey Jr. Right? There's a lot of big names.
Robert Downey Jr. is in a show called McNeil, which is by the Pulitzer Prize winning writer Ayad Akhtar, and it's going to be it's going to be big. It's at Lincoln Center. That's going to be big. And then Patti LuPone and Mia Farrow are starring in a show called The Roommate, where they play roommates.
They're already doing some advanced press for this, and people are already sort of losing their minds about it, too.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Carol, you said big stars. We got to talk movies.
Yeah,
because
let's go there.
The cast of the movies that you guys featured in this section,
it's kind of crazy.
It's kind of crazy. Is it like this writer's strike is over, so now everyone's back doing stuff?
Look, I actually cannot comment on the mechanics behind this. All I know is that the stuff coming out this fall is even the little things. The Thicket, with this Western starring Peter Dinklage as a bounty hunter, trying to find Cutthroat Bill, an outlaw played by Juliette Lewis. I mean, these things, it's like Mad Libs, but the best version of Mad Libs you can imagine.
There's a movie called Conclave, which is about electing a new pope, which stars Ralph Fiennes as a cardinal, and then also Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, and Isabella Rossellini.
Great cast.
Isabella Rossellini for pope.
She of course plays a nun. There's a lot of scheming and hissing behind closed doors. It's going to be phenomenal. The other thing that I'm stoked about is Heretic with Hugh Grant. Hugh Grant plays a murderous sociopath.
He just gets more evil as he gets older in terms of the roles he plays.
He's so good when he's scary.
Yeah.
So Notting Hill, this is not.
No.
Okay.
No.
Hey, what's going on with Francis Ford Coppola?
That's the thing I'm curious. Is that going to be like a success, or could that be a real big bomb?
Well, first of all, it already sort of is a bomb. It premiered in Cannes, and I think it cost something like $120 million self-financed by Coppola.
Meaning like he paid for all of that himself?
I'm not sure about how much he paid for it, but he paid for a lot of it himself.
Him and Kevin Costner.
So tell us what it is.
Doing?
Yeah.
Well, I wish I could tell you what it is, because even the people who I've spoken to have seen it have not really had a cogent synopsis. But it is about the kind of fall of Rome, but it's in futuristic New York. And Chris, maybe you could flesh that one out.
I think it's like a sci-fi fable, basically, and it's a vast, vast epic.
Okay.
And it has polarized.
Does that mean it's
critics.
really long?
I actually don't know how long it is, but I think it's long. I think it's not to everyone's taste. It's very bold, and we'll see. It could go down as one of those things that's one of like the great films of all time, or like one of the great flops.
But he had trouble finding a distributor, and it was unclear if it was even going to come out in the United States. And then he obviously found someone, and it is one of the most anticipated films of the year for a general public to see, just because so many people are involved in it, and it's had such a tortured process to actually come to fruition.
So if there's one thing this fall that you're going to do off of this, it sounds like you're going to do multiple things, or you already have. But if there's one thing that you had to pick.
I have to admit that the museum shows, I'm going to do my best to go to all of them. And they're in a lot of different countries, but I have an absurd job, so it's actually fairly feasible. There's this really exquisite looking show here in New York about Egon Schiele's landscapes in the Neue Gallery. You probably know him. He does these very angular nudes and kind of very erotic, but also a little gristly. But he also has produced these exquisite landscapes and still lives that people are not familiar with. And I think that it's going to be kind of the sleeper hit of the fall.
Love that. And maybe you and I should go see Titanic.
Yeah,
yes.
We have
Let's
to play
go.
catch
I'll
up.
For work.
That would be really fun. All right, guys, thank you so much.
That's the editor of Bloomberg Pursuits, Chris Rouser, and Bloomberg Pursuits arts columnist and culture dictator?
That's right? Culture war dictator.
Culture war dictator, James Carmy.
And that wraps up the weekend edition of Bloomberg Business Week from Bloomberg Radio. Thank you so much for joining us.
Be sure to tune into Bloomberg Business Week Monday through Friday starting at 2 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg TV, Bloomberg Radio, and on Sirius XM channel 121. And listen to us on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto free in the Apple App Store or on Google Play.
You can also watch our daily broadcast on YouTube. Just search Bloomberg Global News. We're simulcast on Bloomberg Originals, available at Bloomberg.com/originals, and streaming platforms including Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Samsung TV Plus, and more.
Find our Bloomberg Business Week podcast at Bloomberg.com, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And the latest edition of the magazine. It's available on newsstands now at Bloomberg.com and always on the Bloomberg Terminal. I'm Tim Stenovec.
And I'm Carol Massar. Have a good and safe holiday weekend, everyone.
This is the Bloomberg Business Week podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business App. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.